Now, more stories, insights, and analysis of Illinois policy and politics. This is Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Once again, your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Mike Lucci, Vice President of Policy at the Illinois Policy Institute. Steve Rauschenberger, longtime state senator, now the president of the Technology and Manufacturing Association. And gentlemen, one other thing that happened this week was Daddy's little girl, Lisa. Oh, she's darling, especially when she pretends to be a lawyer. And she pretended to be a lawyer this week because she moved, clearly at the behest of the powers that be in the General Assembly that are trying to negotiate this surrender deal by Republicans to increase taxes for very little in return, as we've been discussing. She moved against state workers, so it's not bad enough that Mike Madigan has left the state unable to pay its bills. Now Lisa Madigan wants to leave state workers unable to pay their bills because she's moving to say no compensation for state workers until we have something we call a budget, whether it's constitutionally balanced or not. What do you think the play is there for the governor, and what is Lisa Madigan trying to do, as I'm sort of intimating? Steve?
I would guess that Lisa's trying to back him into a corner.
Right.
And you know, with the crisis of state workers and figuring out how to staff the prisons, there's some things that just have to be staffed. There is no choice. You've got to have guards at the prisons, as they found out in Delaware. So, you know, I think this is grandstanding. I mean, she's had 2.5 years to interact. She's had 16 or 12 years as she could have defended the taxpayer. She could have talked about unbalanced budgets. She could have asked why presiding officers were signing budgets and asserting that they were balanced and walking out 15 minutes later and admitting that they were unbalanced. I mean, there's been constitutional violations I would have liked my attorney general to weigh in on. This is the last one. So at the peak of the crisis, she's going to try to invoke the workers and crisis in the state of Illinois. Well, thank you, Lisa.
Well, that's it, right? Why now? As we've mentioned before, 13, 14, 15 years of unbalanced budgets that we call a budget, but wouldn't pass constitutional muster. And she's been a church mouse. I mean, I suppose she was working on her continuing legal education credits or something during that period of time. But so why now? And what's the political play for Lisa, who likes to pretend she's independent of her father, the speaker?
I'm not sure, but it doesn't look very independent to me. I don't know what politically she thinks she gets out of this unless it is doing the work of John Cullerton and Mike Madigan in pushing the governor's back up against the wall.
And Mike, what's the policy response from the Institute with the gambit that Lisa Madigan has embarked upon?
We're looking to see the legality of it. I mean, she might be legally correct that she can do this, but it raises the question, why now? Why not a year ago? Why not, a significant amount of time ago? It is interesting also from the policy perspective where you see this Senate deal, which is, massively anti-growth, and it might slip through. So it might be the case that the speaker wants to put this deal on the governor's desk, and a crisis might force a signature. All of these things might be at play, but when we looked at the Senate deal, we thought, this is tremendously anti-growth. But if it were to get into the House and then be sent to the governor's desk, having some sort of crisis might make it so that there's more leverage to get a signature on that deal.
Another interesting juxtaposition this week, our newly minted state comptroller, Susana Mendoza from Chicago, who was parroting our previous comptroller, Leslie Munger's no budget, no pay proposal. You don't pass a constitutionally balanced budget, send it to the governor's desk, then you don't get paid as a state legislator. Let's change the law in that direction. Susana Mendoza adopted that as part of her platform as well, and yet she paid state legislators last week. So doesn't that provide a political opportunity for the governor to kind of provide some leverage for his position back against them by saying, hey, state workers, you want to wake up here? The politicians get paid. You don't. They're coming after you to use you and your household income as means to their political ends. You sure you want to cast your lot with the Senate president and the Speaker of the House?
Yeah, I think that's fair game, and they ought to call Lisa out. They've been the unions have been big supporters of Lisa Madigan's ascension to Attorney General, and now the way she rewards them is when she sees a political opportunity to force a crisis, the first thing she does is attack their pocketbook.
And the statement that the unions made when this legal move was put in place is they were seemingly surprised. reacted as if they didn't know this was coming. They reacted as if they were shocked. They didn't think this was a good idea. They just wanted to at least continue getting their paychecks and going to work, despite the other negotiations that are underway. So it did seem that they were legitimately surprised that Lisa put this on the table and might be forcing their hand here.
Do you think it's because, I mean, here's the interesting thing, because on the one hand, Governor Rauner's negotiated 20 collective bargaining agreements that included a wage freeze and merit pay for smaller units of state workers represented by various unions. And then you've got the AFSCME impasse with respect to the 37,000 state workers that's ongoing. But in terms of the politics of this, Lisa Madigan and the Democrat leadership of the General Assembly must be essentially saying, we've so successfully poisoned the well with state workers, public employees against the governor, that we can afford to use them as a chess piece and we'll get away with it. I mean, isn't that the only logical conclusion?
It sure feels that way. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but, and particularly at a time, what it does do, though, is it forces this Senate so-called compromise, or this Senate proposal, to kind of the 0 point of the negotiations. I mean, it heightens the focus on that, which certainly serves John Cullerton's interests and the spenders in Springfield. So, here's the only solution for you. Otherwise, we're going to furlough state workers.
Well, to Steve's point, Mike, should the governor not allow himself to be put in that pocket by doing what the Illinois Policy Institute is and producing his own balanced budget proposal?
I think that would be great, and I think it would be great to say that to take a step back, not just the governor, everybody who's considering this compromise, and say there's not going to be a compromise in the face of crisis. There's not going to be a deal worked out. If there's this precipitated crisis that seems to be in the works here, that this is not a good faith negotiation. We're going to take a step back and wait till that piece gets worked out. Maybe you have a continuing appropriation for state workers, which even the speaker has put on the table, to take the crisis element out of this so we could actually have a good faith negotiation, albeit over a package that seems very anti-growth right now, or is very anti-growth right now. But no package should be considered in the face of a crisis that's being forced on the negotiator.